You know, since 2020 began, I've been putting a lot more things up my nose than usual. I mean, oh, this is a drawing video? Oh, my. Okay, we're gonna focus on drawing noses today. Let's jump straight into that. So we all have a nose, even though you don't get to pick it. You see what I did? Okay, so anyways, in art, there's a lot of things that we tend to get wrong about drawing the nose when we first start off. So in this video, I'm going to go through some tips that might help you when you are drawing a nose next time, whether you have a reference or you're doing it from imagination. So let's jump into that. Before jumping into drawing the nose, let's get a quick reminder here. So first and foremost, we know that the nose is part of the thirds of the head, right? Which means that the end of the nose really goes up to the brow, but the part that we notice the most is really right here underneath that brow kind of wedge there. But it's important to remember that this is part of the nose, so it's going to be something that we deal with today. Now, another important thing to remember when talking about the nose is that skeletal structure and just overall anatomy is going to play a big part in how the nose looks. This video is not really going to focus on anatomy, but you just kind of want to remember that these ridges and these bony landmarks are going to be points that really do show when you layer on a nose on top of someone's face. Along with someone's bone structure and their anatomy, this is what's going to make their nose look different from other people's noses. And speaking of different noses, well, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of variation that exists between noses out there. So just remember that the guide I'm giving you today is just a generic guide that you can then take and apply to how you want to use it and vary it up as much as you need to. Now, in quick tips, we're all about how do we create a simple nose. So let's look at a good way to kind of break the nose down into simple shapes. We're going to break them down into three main shapes. First, you have the wedge that sits right there on top of the brow. This is what connects the nose into our brow. Remember that bone structure from the side skeleton I showed earlier. Next, we have the bridge, and the bridge is what is coming down, and it usually connects all the way down to the nose right as it starts to loop under to that part that goes to the lip. Now the rest we're seeing as a nice big wedge shape here, and all of this is to help us understand that this is a 3D form sticking out from a surface. We have to remember that because that's a big significant factor of what a nose is. Another tip that really helps out when drawing the nose is to note that where the bottom of the nose connects to the lip, that little kind of dip that you have between the lip going into the nose is always going to be a little bit lower. Well, let's say usually a little bit lower than the nostrils. Of course, this is not always going to be the case, but in the vast majority, this is generally what we see, and it's going to get you something more believable. And the final tip before we jump in here is to remember that when you're drawing in that nostril shape, remember that there is a wraparound. Okay, so you have this creating this bit of a hole here, obviously going into our nose, but the skin right here doesn't start on this plane and go this way, and then all of a sudden you just have some sort of a point. The skin comes down to here and it separates, creating a shape, and this wraps around as well. So you want to make sure that you're drawing this part in when you're drawing something realistic, to make sure that you have this 3D form that creates some bit of depth and thickness to what you're drawing. So just like I showed with the colored diagram, when we're drawing the nose, we're actually going to draw in that wedge shape. So for the front facing nose, you're going to draw in the bridge, we're going to draw in that wedge shape that sits on top for the brow, and then you're going to draw that nice big block wedge that is sitting underneath the bridge. This is going to give you your best jumping off point to start from that already kind of gives you those 3D shapes. Now, if we move that to the side, we're going to look at the 3/4 view, right? So this is not quite fully turned to the side. And you're going to get the same thing. You're literally imagining what the front facing view one looks from if you just moved over to the side of it a little bit. This one does involve a little bit of perspective thinking, but once you get it, it's going to be one of the best ways you can kind of start out for drawing the shape from your imagination. Now, jumping to the side profile view, this one, you can start with a shape or you don't really have to. Obviously, if you think about it, we're just really seeing a triangle. I don't necessarily start with the shape when I am drawing a nose from the side, but if you do need a starting point, a triangle is going to be your best bet. All right, so to begin, I'm going to draw the front-facing view of the nose here, and I'm literally just going to use the shapes that I just created with you guys. So draw them down if you guys are going to follow along with me here. What I'm doing, I'm just building on top of it. There really isn't too much information that I can give proportion wise with the nose because it really does vary, right? Unless you're drawing it with the full face details, there's not really too much I can tell you to fit it in between or halfway points or all that good stuff. So here what we're doing is we came in, we kind of defined the bridge. You want to think of the bridge as the end of that bony mass and where the cartilage begins. Sometimes this can be a big bump for people. Sometimes it looks really bony. Sometimes it looks really bulbous and kind of smooth and it just kind of goes out. This all depends on the nose you're looking at and whose nose it is. I mean, you know, there's just so many out there. Of course, you can come in and make your alterations like you see me doing here. The best tip I can give is when you're drawing a nose is focus the line work more to one side than the other to kind of give a hint at some of that shadow without going into any real shadow details. I'll put in a little indication here for you guys. But again, this video is not really about shading and stuff, so I kind of wanted to steer away from that subject just to kind of focus on some of the more drawing technical aspects. And if I haven't made this point enough, there are a lot of different noses out there, and sometimes you'll be looking more from the bottom of the nose. So make sure you're practicing and understanding that sometimes, even if it's at the same angle as you're seeing someone else, you might see more or less of a nostril or the nostrils like in this picture. So now we're going to take on the 3/4 view here. So a couple things to remember with this one. You do really get a nice indication of right underneath that brow wedge, where that bony part of the nose kind of ends and then it dips into that cartilage. Again, this is going to be a very varied shape depending on who you're looking at. Sorry, I'm repeating myself a lot on that factor. But from here, you get some really interesting shapes because you can really see the nose kind of tuck under and you get to see that connection point with the lip. Now, sometimes I'll put in some construction lines, as you guys can see there, with the ball of the nose. And that's just to remind me that I'm looking at it from this perspective, and also to remember that I have some volume that I'm dealing with, right? When we're drawing realistic, when we're drawing 3D objects, we have to remember that we have to make them appear 3D in space, right? That's the illusion that we're giving as artists. So you want to draw these things in as well. Don't forget the wraparound. Don't remember the nostril. The little hole of the nostril does not touch the flaring wing of that nostril skin, okay? Make sure you show some of that wraparound for a nice 3D form. And lastly, we jump to the profile view nose. Now, this is probably the favorite of most artists to draw. What I do want to show here is kind of a bad example at first. When you look at the side view from a nose, and let's say you get that bony kind of nose as a reference here, it's going to look bumpy, and you're going to want to draw those bumps and all those details, right? But it's going to look wrong. As you guys can see, it kind of looked like I was drawing like a hillscape on the side or something here. So I recommend you find that bony landmark where you can see I kind of drew that line going down, and then from there just keep it like a straight or like a slightly curved line or something going down, and then you find that turnaround of the underneath of the nose, and then you can kind of draw a line straight over and then a line straight up that almost connects with that brow curve. Okay, and this is going to be a pretty good indication of where you can place the wing of the nostril. And then you can come in and then place in the hole of the nostril. And again, it sits on top of that nose. It doesn't connect with anything. Really focus on those wraparounds. One proportion check I can give you here is from the tip of the nose to the end of the nostril wing there. If you find that halfway point, it'll give you a pretty good indication of where the middle of that nostril hole is. Alright guys, and that's the end of the video. Before I go, I do want to say a huge thank you to you guys because at the time of making this video, I hit 1K subscribers, and it's because of you. Honestly, I can't thank you guys enough. This Saturday, I'm going to be putting on a live stream thank you event where me and my friends are just going to draw some silly stuff. We're going to have drinks on hand, so I suggest you do too. Come hang out with us, give suggestions for crazy stuff for us to draw in the chat, and it'll be a good time. I'll see you guys there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.